3, 2, 1. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sista Docs Exhale. This is the last episode in this season, brought to you by these sisters here. Please introduce yourselves.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Lyrical Tay. My focus is diversity in higher education with a specific focus on faculty diversity.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Cupid. My focus is on sister circles and Black women in higher education.
And I am Dr. Tahira Madi, also known as Dr. 99, and I specialize in community psychology. We are members of a sister circle that formed while we were earning our PhDs, and we went through a lot as Black women often do in our educational and professional journeys. So in these episodes, we talk about our experiences, we relate our research to everyday life, and we exhale. So for today's Exhale, we have invited 3 guests, Christopher Brown, Rasheed Green, and Christopher Korjar, to talk to us about art. Dr. Lyrical Tay, can you please introduce our guests?
Yes, Dr. 99. Christopher Brown, originally from Salisbury, Maryland. Christopher Brown's varied experience include videography, web series creation, freelance writing for entertainment and gaming websites, web design, podcast development, and comic strip and comic book creation. His various works are located on his website at 30media.com. And you can call him Chris or Chris D. If you call me Chris, if you call me Chris Brown, I'm gonna grumble and make an obligatory remark. Your call on that one.
It's true.
Rasheed Green is an internationally touring actor, writer, comedian based in Baltimore, Maryland. His artistry includes scripted theater, improv, and sketch comedy. His art is unapologetically Black. Word. Christopher Korjar is a visual artist who is recently returned from France, where before the global COVID pandemic, he implemented his practice in the streets of the Kings and volunteered for the Agency of Artists in Exile. Christopher researches and creates art in response to the interactions he has with other people when he enters active public spaces and openly engages in artistic practices such as drawing or recording with wearable technology. Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate being here.
Happy to be here.
So our first question in regards to our episode on art is, how do you define yourself as an artist?
A poet. Words. Words are my art.
I guess I have different ways. I never thought of myself as an artist. I think I've been called one, but I keep a blog, DC Brand 99. I haven't contributed to it in a long time, but I was using entertainment journalism and just different ways of speaking about art and speaking about people who make art, just in a very creative way. So that's part of my art, and I think that might be it. Oh yeah, well then now I've recently gotten into filmmaking, so that's another form of art, and I think that's about it. I don't know. I'll probably come up with something else.
Creative writing.
Right, yeah, creative writing. But yeah, that label artist is almost like I know it's there, but I don't grab onto it because I know people like Chris K and Chris Brown and, people like that I consider artists because I'm always amazed at what they do. And I think that kind of thing, when people amaze me with the things that they create, I start looking at them as artists and myself a little bit less so.
That's interesting that you said that, Dr. Nine. We also have to remind you that you're also an author of 2 books. And yeah. So that's
there we go. True. Okay. So all the writing stuff and things. Yep.
Yeah, so in regards to how do I define myself as an artist, I'll also say poetry and dance. I think for me, dance, especially during this time, is a form of therapy. So that being said, I know in the past we've worked together in regards to using art for our research. So can y'all discuss a little bit more on how we use art to do research?
I think in terms of, especially in the work we've done with young Black girls, letting the creation of collages and also using different forms of media really help them to dig towards their own internal artistic expression. I think that was definitely a way that we've used art. We've also used art when we were trying to help our community understand what Black Lives Matter mean, by bringing in local poets, by creating a communal poem in the middle of the poetry night and open mic night, and by allowing people to express themselves in any form that they need, be it a dramatic monologue or even reading other folks' poetry. So I think that's just some of the most recent ways. We've actually had several poetry nights to bring community and our Black voices together.
Did you want to add on anything, Dr. 99?
No, Dr. Lyrical Tay covered it. She was our fearless leader through most of that, heading up our Sista Docs organization, grad student organization. Or no, we were Sister Scholars at that time.
And even in thinking of how, say I've come up with the phrase, I'm like, oh, we gotta have this awesome phrase, but my flyer skills are like, nah. And so having Dr. 99's like, hold on, let me whip this up real quick. And so we've created some really great flyers to represent the voice and the images that we wanted. And I think that was important too, because representation matters, so, yeah.
Speaking of representation matters, I also want to add on, so for the project that we did on Michelle Obama and Black girls, we also created art at the end as a form of analysis. So Dr. Lyrical Tay, you created a poem, and I also created a collage piece, which actually Chris K helped me to finalize. So can y'all talk a little bit more about your role as a scholar and also an artist? How do you intersect those?
Man, my scholarship co-opted my poetry, because I used to write poems about everything, social issues, love, all of that. And while I was in the academy, I'm still working in the academy, but while I was a student, my poetry suddenly became response to what I was reading and what I was wrestling with. And also thinking about, like, I wrote a poem about the tenure track and how diversity hires get hired in this tenure track, but not really centered and listened to. So my art became a reflection of my inner and outer struggles in the academy, which angered me, because even when I went to write a love poem, I wrote a social political poem about class and race in Baltimore. Now, love the poem, but I wanted to write a real love poem, but it was a love poem about Baltimore in some ways.
I use mine as a refuge. So I would be working hard doing all this academic writing, getting a master's, getting a PhD, and 3 times a week I would be in DC, covering music scenes, watching shows, reviewing music. And that just became something where I had to do it and had to just write as freely and creatively as I could, because the academic writing was so constrained. So I think that's what it became to me, just a refuge and almost like this pushback to all these boundaries that were imposed upon me.
I like the term that you use, refuge. I would say for me as well, it was a form of refuge. I think oftentimes we do have to do a lot of reading, especially in a short period of time, and synthesize the literature. So for me, if I felt as though I was sitting too long, literally sitting too long, because we can sit for hours upon hours and not even realize it as we're doing these analysis, I literally had to get up and dance and move my body, right? So having the ability to both use dance as a form of art and therapy, and also physical health, which I think oftentimes as graduate students, our physical health declines. So I would say that also was a form of physical exercise for me. And so connected to that, yeah, both mentioned boundaries and wanted to escape those boundaries and merge those boundaries. So can y'all address a little bit more about the myth of art and the traditional disciplinary work that we do? So in regards to being an artist, what do you think, what stereotypes or what boundaries or misconceptions do you think we're challenging when we use art as a form of research or art as a form of practice to get us through the process?
I would say challenging the boundary that academics are only academics and that they can only do those things. And I think a lot of people do, you know, once you take on that identity, they kind of want to be seen as academic and want to be seen as having a certain type of mind, I would say. And also working with Chris Brown, that's how I met him, doing things that also involve comedy as a form of art. So he'll probably talk about that, but it was a group of people who had a comic, or they wrote like a comic blog, had different superhero characters and all this stuff. And I was invited to come use comedy to invent a superhero character. And that was something else. We're just having to use laughter and comedy to even exhale out, you know, all the rest of this other stuff, the other pressures that we were under. But yeah, as far as there seems to be like this thing where you have to be either an artist or you're something else. You know, you're an academic, but you're not something else. So I just really like the opportunity to be all these things at once.
Yeah.
And go ahead, Dr. Cupid.
Oh, no, I was going to ask if you had anything to add on.
Yeah, I was going to say, in terms of thinking about boundaries, at one point, because I wrote so many poems in relationship to the doctoral process and the dissertation, that I was going to put poems as chapter breaks. But by the time I got to it, I was like, not right now, I'm gonna have to do that later. But in the final synopsis, as I was doing like my chapter 5, a poem just emerged. I was like, oh no, I gotta get this out. And so it was a poem I think I did at the end of our last Sister Docs Exhale, because it was a synthesis of my results. So in reading that poem, it was the synthesis to the scholarly material that I done. So I definitely see it, as Dr. 99 said, it as a way to express ourselves outside of the conformity of academic culture.
Thank you all for your responses. I would say too, in regards to nonconformity, I think we often reference ourselves as doing interdisciplinary work. So the fact that we view art as a discipline and a practice helps us, again, to push against the misconceptions that if you're an academic, then you just read, right? We know that we have media and communication scholar, for example, who analyze movies. Dr. Moffat, for example, in her work on Disney, looking at how that influences the perceptions of Black children. So we see the ways in which our life outside of academia merges within our life within academia. So I think that's great that we're recognized that we can be multiple things at once. And in regards to being multiple things, we're also consumers of art, right? So we can think about this present moment, and some people have referred to this present moment as a Black Renaissance. So I'm curious what you think about ourselves as consumers and our responsibility of consuming this art.
I don't know if I have a responsibility to consume. I think we do. There are a lot. Well, that's not true, because I'll be sitting with Chris B and we'll say, okay, we got to watch this, right? For the culture, right? We got to watch this. And that's how we made it through a couple of series or different things, because it's like, well, we have to, because people are going to talk about it and we just want to, I don't know, just see what people have to say, especially because we're creators ourselves and creating things like that we want other people to consume. So just kind of, I guess that's a responsibility, but I think I have a bigger responsibility to create. And that's what I tell my children now. Like, you have a responsibility to create, especially my oldest son is a very gifted writer. My youngest son is a very gifted, drawing, and he was in art club and just brought home all these drawings and stuff. So I'm like, you have a responsibility to keep up this creativity and make sure that you put things out there. So you're not always on your phone consuming what other people are giving to you. You have to put stuff out there for other people.
So I wanted to chime in. There's a couple of threads that seem to be going on. I think art is definitely a form of expression that you don't have to put a monetary value on. And at the same time, we as artists, whether it's a musician or a visual artist or a performer, we're all trying to put our voice on display and tell a story, not in words, but sometimes in words, right? I think the thing that I'm kind of dealing with now is what it means to be like a professional artist, where you do get paid for the services that you provide. And there's not much room to really, well, there's probably like two stages. There's like lower tier contractual work, and then high tier stuff where you get paid an exorbitant amount of money for your recognition or for the work that you do. And both require a certain amount of character that's just different. Uh, when I see the academics tied to the arts, I think it's a professional route that people take to support their artistic expression. And in the past, it's just been a very feasible way for people, especially in the Baltimore community, to supplant their knowledge in the arts or their passion in the arts. They go into education because it's the primary source of earning an income. So you could be a a high school arts teacher or a theater teacher or a musician, with you know, on the local scene. I see, you know, there's a lot of jaded perspectives, I think, when it comes to saying I am an artist fully committed to a craft. That, you know, usually I think people define the artist as kind of like fringe members of society that don't really have a essential role in the maybe the development of I don't know. I mean, obviously, as an artist, I think I have a very developmental role in the culture that's at hand. Uh, but I think a lot of people are always asking, "Oh, what do you do? You're an artist, but like, what do you do? What do you are you an educator? Are you you know, what field do you work in? Are you in marketing? Are you in advertisement?" So I'm speaking specifically of visual arts. Uh, for me, um, I think it's hard to say that uh, we can place uh, right now, because we live in such like a capitalist society. We place a lot of value, monetary value, on the success of a body of work or a music style or film style, and usually the mainstream culture uh, doesn't recognize a lot that's going on in the underpinnings of the world. So when you say, Dr. 99, that, you know, you're catching up with culture by watching, you know, a series on TV, to me, I'm a little bit conflicted by that, because I feel like there's a, even though it's been so horizontalized in the past decade, the media that we are exposed to is heavily geared towards being digestible, you know, to be uh, so that everyone can kind of not just, I mean, you obviously, you can feel uncomfortable by watching something or moved and all this stuff, but I think there's a lot that's kind of just washed away, or uh, people people who have money in institutions or mainstream media tend to like funnel a lot of money towards specific voices to represent a larger audience that may feel neglected in general.
I think, Chris K, you did bring up an interesting point in regards to art and how, or the tension between it being digestible and making us feel uncomfortable. And also, Dr. 99, you said that you want your sons to realize that they should be producers now, right? Creators. So I would say in our responsibilities as parents or as educators, also Dr. Larry Cote, what do you think the responsibility is to push out that mindset that your children or your students should be producing or creating rather than consuming more?
I think it's a both and, to consume and to produce, right? Because we want to help them to develop their voice, you know, as Chris K said, and think about their agency through art. So when we're teaching a specific content, you know, specifically when I used to teach American government, it's like, okay, here's this theme. We're going to talk about civic agency. What does that make you think about? What do you picture? How do you feel when we talk about freedom, liberty? What visual images come along? What words come along? So that whatever their particular outlet is, they're able to not only express themselves in the regurgitation of whatever that they're taught to memorize in terms of American history, but then they can also wrestle with it in creative ways. And so that wrestle, you know, that engagement with it, we've created poems, we've created posters, you know, and so they are producing that. And while producing, they're learning. So as an educator, when I was in K-12, that was a way that I could get students to engage more with the materials, because I'd ask them, what does that mean? What does this symbolize? What, you know, theme in this reading or in this text does it correspond to? And the students can recognize that when we put these symbols up and around, when students perform their poetry in class, you know, that sort of thing, because that creativity and that agency and that voice is empowering.
Chris K, you brought us to the sections in which we bring y'all in as guests. You already mentioned that you're currently challenging yourself in regards to viewing yourself as a professional artist, and what does that mean? So I'm wondering as well, what does it mean for Rasheed and Chris B to view yourself as an artist? How do you define yourself as an artist? Are you a hobbyist? Are you full-time, part-time? And what does that mean for your practice?
I guess I can start. So I am a full-time artist. I'm a full-time artist. I also have a non-artistic day job that pays my bills and my rents until I can make a living wage as a full-time artist. So I am a full-time artist, but I also have many side hustles as well. So.
Yeah, similarly, I consider myself a full-time artist. My day job actually does afford me a lot of artistic opportunities. I'm a public affairs specialist, but I've managed to mold that into also being a graphic designer, a videographer, an illustrator. I've done comic book stuff for the job, and this is a government job. But I figured out ways to kind of maneuver my talents into my position so that I get to use all aspects of my abilities in my day job. And then, of course, outside of that, continuing the full-time job, as Rasheed said, all of my outside hustles are artistic in nature.
Both of y'all reference balancing. What does it mean to be an artist, full-time or part-time? So can you share a little bit more about within that balance, how do you define the purpose of art for yourself? That also goes to Chris K.
Okay, so I'll start. So as I commit to being a full-time artist and I guess balancing the work that I do and in the arts and the career objectives I have, I think it's for me it's a way of so it's not just about expression, because there's kind of like pragmatic stuff that like a skills based skill set that I'm trying to share or uh, build upon. Repeat the question one more time, though. What was the sorry? What was the question exactly?
The question exactly is, what is the purpose of your art?
Okay, so there's like a therapeutic purpose when I create it, and then there's an educational purpose, to kind of reframe concepts about whatever it is my research is based on for the moment. And so, and then there's the other purpose, I think, because I'm a visual artist, is to sell the work. So there's like a business aspect to it. And it affords me a lot of privilege, the artist's lifestyle. So I get to travel a lot, and I get to take time to reflect on who I am as a person, like personal identity stuff. So that to me is big. But I think so. My main purpose is really to get my visual art and my writing out, and then also to have some sort of educational principle involved, based on the concepts that I'm addressing in the work.
Okay. For me, the purpose of my art is to tell a story. I'm a natural storyteller. It's something that I've always loved and enjoyed, and that I've really wanted to pursue my whole life for the most part. So everything that I do is to try and convey an idea, an image, a story, a feeling, something so that people can get the message of whatever it is I'm producing, whether I'm producing a logo image for someone's business, or whether I'm actually telling a story through writing or through comic books or comic strips or film. I like to narrate and convey ideas.
Rasheed, did you want to answer the question about the purpose of your art?
Yeah. The purpose of my art, I think, I feel, is just to. My art is from a Black experience, a Black queer experience, and it's for Black queer people. So I think just being who I am and being alive and being unapologetic about who I am is such a revolutionary act. And I think that revolutionary act informs my art, which empowers me to be more revolutionary, to be able to live unapologetically, to be able to see art from a different perspective, especially right now I do a lot of improv and sketch comedy, and those mediums are traditionally very white, male-led spaces. So just me being in the space is revolutionary.
Yeah,
Thank
it's kind of the same in I think the visual art world, and I think the majority of this country is still white, and I think that white male patriarchy has kind of consumed a lot of attention, and it's only recently that there have been kind of like pioneers or trailblazers that are getting recognized as Black artists, and so even in the visual art world, it's hard. It's a process of kind of like being inspired and inspiring at the same time for others. I once recently there was a woman who came to my show who was vision impaired, couldn't see, and she came to the art exhibit, right? And she wanted to hear music that we had in the show that related to like a historical Black perspective or historical Black band that had never, their work had never been digitized. And she came to the show to learn about this experience that we were producing, me and my collective, about basically about Black history and conceptual art. And having her come to that show really kind of moved me, and I hope it moved her in a way that was she could hear something that she kind of had a connection to. And um, I think for me, if I can just inspire that and inspire and be inspired by the audience, then I feel like I've done at least a step towards some success in my artistry. So that space of the white heteronormative world, like us queer artists, us Black artists are just starting to get recognized for the work that we do. And I think that's a lot of, I think Rasheed can even attest to it. There's a lot of pushing boulders and trying to figure out how to really dismantle a lot of structure. So, and
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, I can totally attest to that.
yeah, even like I worked in like TV production for a bit, and even there, I wouldn't necessarily throw anyone under the bus, but it's not a, it's really there's not many Black people that work on sets, and it's still really engineered against uh, giving Black voice, especially in the workforce. So not even in the actual display of actors, like Black actors or Black actresses or queer Black actresses and actors. Even the workforce, there's no Black people in it. So that world is just really hard to pierce, not just for the talent, but for the crew as well. And I think that there's a lot of maybe not noticeable racism and structural homophobia, but it's definitely apparent once you enter that organization for members of those communities, right? So, and it's strange because I think this is just coming to head because there's so much in the zeitgeist about it right now, right at this moment.
There's a lot of pressure as an artist in general, right? Because there's the pressure of when will the next gig come? When will you be creatively inspired to even, create again? So you have all of those normal artist issues, and then you compound your labels onto that. So I add Black onto just being an artist. So then it's like the pressure of just being an artist in general, and then it's like, okay, the pressure of being a Black artist in this space, oftentimes, especially doing improv and sketch comedy and even scripted theater, sometimes you're the only Black face in the cast. So, and then you also, like, particularly at my improv and sketch theater, our artistic director is white. She's a white woman. So when she's giving notes on us creating our art, it's through a white lens. So how can she determine what I think is funny? You know what I mean? What I think is funny and what's funny to her are two different things. And because who we are informs our comedy, it's really kind of it's very problematic to have a white person setting the rubric for what's funny if they're evaluating Black art. And oftentimes the people who are deeming things, and this is outside of the world, because I'm speaking from the world of theater and the world of comedy, but even outside of the world of theater, any art medium, whether it's visual art or whether you write or whether you dance or whether you sing, the people who are the tastemakers, the people who are deeming things worthy of consumption are also white. So there's that pressure as well to be a Black artist, but you're being judged through a white lens for everything you do. They're saying if it's worthy. They're saying if it's worth X amount of dollars. They get to decide that, and it's like, well, why do you get to decide how much Black art is worth? Why do you get to decide Why do you get to decide? And it even opens up to, like, the media, it's like the people who are evaluating art and writing and commentating on art, the Washington Post, the Baltimore Sun, local magazines. They're deciding whose art gets covered and whose art gets recognition. And those people in those positions are also usually white. So it's a huge cycle. And then you have the consumers who are getting their information from white-led sources. So unless the consumer's really looking for that, they're not gonna find our art a lot of the times, unless we're at a show with other white artists and they happen to, discover us there, or unless they're really searching for Black art, is how they find us. Because a lot of the times, like, doing theater in Baltimore, I've been in Baltimore, August will be 11 years I've been in Baltimore. I've never met a non-white theater critic. And I've done tons of shows. All of the theater critics are white. So their lens for what is captivating is already skewed, because we already know that there's inherent biases that we all have. And we all take our baggage with us everywhere we go, whether we're taking it to work, whether we're taking it out with our friends, whether we're taking that bias to the bedroom. Your biases show up everywhere. So it's pretty apparent that it would show up if you're evaluating art. So that's for me my biggest challenge is, and that's really what made me buckle down and just say, hey, listen, I've had to tell critics after shows, I've had to tell audience members after my improv and sketch shows, they would come up and they say, I really didn't get that joke that you made. And I'm like, well, if you didn't get it, it probably wasn't for you, because everything isn't for everybody. And we have a lot of Black audience members who come to my weekly show, and the person who came up after the show was a white person. And I'm like, you know what? Everything's not for everybody. And that joke might have been for the Black people in the room. And that's really okay. But, like, the white person didn't see it that way. They're like, well, I need to get the joke. I'm like, it's not for you. It just simply isn't for you. You can't have everything. Just like, like white people have secret jokes that I'm not privy to. And I'm okay with everything not being for me. I'm okay with the space. Sometimes your art is just for who you're giving it to, and it's not for the world. It's not for mass consumption. It might be for a targeted audience.
Right. You brought up some really excellent points that I do want to tie together. and throw to Dr. 99, Chris B, and also Dr. Lyrical Tay, because I know for Dr. 99, Dr. Lyrical Tay, when we do go out together and consume art, it has always been in the Black space, right? So us as consumers, we're intentional about consuming Black art, whether or not it was a spoken word night, whether or not we're going to see a play or a concert, it's by a Black artist, right? So, and also in thinking about Chris B and Dr. 99, the production company and the film that y'all are working on is Black centered, right? So I'm curious to hear about your process in centering Blackness, who you want to consume it, who you want to be the critics of it, and what spaces allow you to share your art more readily so you're not so worried about the white gaze. Did you want to start, Dr. 99? I see you nodding your head.
I'm gonna let Chris do the talking for this one.
Okay. So first off, I definitely agree with the idea that not everything's for everybody. And it took me a while to figure that out too. You know, there are some things that I'm just not going to get because I'm not a part of those spaces. There's some things that other people aren't going to get that I may put out there that they don't have my experience or my background or, you know, my life. So they may not get it, which is why I think it's really important for us to have our own ways of presenting these things, our own spaces, our own production companies, our own things where we can put these out for our own people, you know. Saying all that to say, you know, the film that we're working on, it is Black centered. It's a sci-fi romantic comedy that's centered on Blackness. And we are doing it ourselves as it stands right now. We're hiring the cast, we're doing all the production ourselves, and we're just going ahead and doing it. Mostly, one, out of necessity, because it's the only way that we're really sure that we're going to be able to produce it the way that we want it produced. But two, so that we can make sure it has the right Black gaze. I mean, the right Black story being told.
We thought about friendship, we thought about love, we thought about dating. We wanted to add different Black perspectives. We wanted to make sure that we had all types of people represented. You know, Blackness is not just this one thing that everybody knows and we each can identify and say that's Blackness. We just want to, yeah, even doing something that's sci-fi, you know, that's something that's not necessarily always associated with Blackness, even though there's, you know, examples and different people who have written in that genre before or created in that genre. But I also wanted to go back to what you were talking about as far as people who are looking at our stuff and deciding what's funny, what's right, what's popular. And that was one of the reasons that I started the entertainment blog DC Brand 99, because I'm watching you know, consuming stuff from the Washington Post or the city papers that were in between Baltimore and Washington, DC. And I was seeing that not only were there white critics that were doing stuff, but they would have people who were Black, but who still either weren't from this area, or maybe if they were from the area, they still didn't know what they were looking at. And I didn't appreciate the way that, and I've written about this before for Taking Me Out to the Go-Go magazine, which is another example of people getting together and putting their own pennies together to tell their own story. So that's about the go-go music culture. But I got tired of seeing people who had no idea what they were looking at speaking on it. And from Taking Me Out to the Go-Go's, that's been like since 1996. And what's happened since then is other journalists and other people study that, you know, as a source, and then start going off, and they're the ones who get grants. They're the ones who get asked to speak on panels. And some people might get the creator of Taking Me Out to the Go-Go to speak on panels, but he's not getting the same money as they are. And I think money has to do with this. So just like with DC Brand 99, if I want to make sure the right gaze is on a show or listening to people's music, because I'm the target audience, I'm still spending my money. That's my gas money. That's me only doing it because I have the time. I have the money to put up for the website, and doing these things basically for my own sanity and mental health. And doing the movie, you know, we like watching movies, we like watching shows, but we don't really like everything. There's a lot of stuff that we feel like is missing. So why can't there be, you know, our main woman in our movie is queer, but why does that have to, you know, certain things just don't have to be a thing. It can just be, this is life, because we have a very diverse circle. Our circle of creatives is Black, but we're not each the same type of person. And that's also something we wanted to bring in. We wanted to have a character who's kind of religious. We wanted to have, you know, just all these different aspects. But even though we did, you know, we want to have the script read, and hopefully we would get money to have it done. But in case somebody doesn't get it or they want to water us down, we did the Indiegogo campaign, and we just have to be prepared to, whoever works with us, we don't have a whole lot of money, but if you're willing to stick with us to tell this great story, and the way we've been able to bring the people in is because they really love the story that we're trying to tell. So we're, you know, dependent on community, which is another aspect of this arts conversation.
So Dr. 99, you mentioned community, which brings me to the concluding section of this discussion part. And that also, Chris K, you mentioned that the zeitgeist right now is the awareness of the racism that exists within our society. So this question is for everyone. Due to national consciousness about structural racism, what do you think your role as an artist is now? Has it changed? Do you think you should be doing more Black-centered work in communities with the Black gaze? Do you think you should be branding out more so that you're not so worried about who is consuming your art that is not Black? So I'm just wondering, how has it shifted, or if it's not shifted, why so?
So like I think I talked to you before, I've kind of grown up in I primarily grew up in white spaces. It wasn't really until Baltimore, living here, that I really reaffirmed my own Blackness. And that's kind of when my art career kind of got a jump start, about like 8 years ago, moving to like the Creative Alliance in Baltimore. I think in grad school, when I was creating the body of work that's driven my career in the past couple of years, I've been trying to make work that's more palatable for white people to get. So, and it's actually rooted in authentic personal history. So a lot of it ties in like French culture, where I spent like a lot of time in my life. Like my personal identity was shaped in France. And it wasn't until grad school that I figured out, oh, there's this kind of like archetype that I can kind of incorporate in how I do my artwork. And I started creating this narrative because I think at UMBC it's like really research based. So I was digging into a lot of research around what the white gaze is, or what the gaze is in general, and how it applied to my practice of drawing in public. So, and I would do these conference talks, and I would write about my work with all this kind of fluff that had nothing to do with the visceral experience that I was having when I was drawing in public. Just to give you like a background, cops or security would approach me as I just sat and drew, or as I drew in public. And 9 times out of 10, someone would approach me just being at leisure, right? Like drawing and doing not much. There was nothing warranted in interaction. I wasn't asking to be a subject of a conversation for someone else. But in creating that whole thing, and what's been going on right now, I've been slowly reframing my bent, like what it means, the stuff that I've been doing, because I feel like it's really, it is trying too hard to get recognized in what Rasheed was kind of saying by the tastemakers. You know, with this kind of Black experience that's been going on in it. I think that my art, the work that I do, applies to everybody, not just Black people, but specifically the reactions I have in my own body is what's most felt when I do my art practice. So I feel like now, because of what's been happening, I think it is my duty to myself to really understand what I want to hold up in front of everyone, regardless of what gets, you know, what becomes easily digestible. So
I also want to lift up the fact that other people who are not Black take from or consume and look at and study Black people all the time, just being themselves in these artistic ways, and take it and copy it, or, the term culture vulture comes up, just other things where, even in times like this, people say, I wish they love Black people as much as they love Black culture. So as many times as they try to, flip us into something else that's more palatable, when we're at our most authentic selves, bringing our full selves, that's when it's like, oh, look, that's really interesting, that's really cool. And then that's used for somebody else's benefit or entertainment. You know what I mean? So it's also a lot of pilfering happening, even as we start going through that, what's palatable for what audience.
Yeah, if I could comment also, I think I don't think that there's more of a call to action now. I mean, obviously, race relations nationally is being talked about more frequently, um, especially these past few weeks. Um, I think what I worry about as a result of the past few weeks, almost month, I guess, what I worry about is the result being um, um, Black art being the new hot thing, and not really being consumed and people being educated on Black art, but like white people consuming it because they don't want to be viewed as racist, or trying to tokenize us in these art spaces, which is something I see a lot of. Um, and I think, and I've been a victim of it too. I've been a victim of like the tokenization process where it's like, well, we are diverse. Let's pat ourselves on the back. This white-led organization does have Black artists in the space, and there we've solved diversity. um, we've solved the equity issue by adding in Black actors. So I worry about more tokenization because I think we have these conversations on race a lot, and I think as a Black person, I get kind of tired of those conversations. So I don't really have them that much anymore with white people. I just focus. I channel all of that frustration back into the art. Um, I do hope that what we've been experiencing as a country, though, that it allows Black people to be more liberated in their art. And I hope that we can channel that energy into not only creating more art, but like educating other Black people about our art. That's my hope for this. Just because I also grew up in predominantly white neighborhoods growing up until I was about 18. So being in Baltimore as a city, as an art scene, Baltimore's art scene for Black artists is wonderful. But when you get into the institutions that are responsible for producing and showcasing the art, that's where you run into the issue for me. It's not so much the scene as a whole, because there's tons of Black artists that I'm in community with in Baltimore. For me, it's dealing with the organizations because they have the money, which means you have the power. And it's harder for, I mean, we all know this, it's harder for Black-led organizations to get funding for arts programming. So it's that piece also. And then the few Black-led art spaces that are in Baltimore, everyone wants to work with them. So it's hard to get in because you have all the Black artists trying to get into the Black-led organizations. So there's only but so much space. But it's hard to branch out on your own and create your own art space because it's harder for Black artists to get that funding. I've been up for grants several times in Baltimore, and 3 out of the last 5 times I've applied for grants, those grants went to white artists who weren't even from Maryland. They were in Baltimore for like a year, and they weren't even from the U.S. Two of the times they were white artists who weren't even from the United States. they were they were from Europe. So it was, and I'm thinking, I'm like, so philanthropists and benefactors would rather give grant money to white artists who aren't even from the United States rather than investing in Black artists who are in their city. And that's very telling to me. Again, I channel all of that back into the art, and hope for good things. But what I hope from it is that we can, if the goal is, if Black people have that goal, if they want, I hope we can get paid more fairly for our art. I hope that we can be in spaces where our art is appreciated as well. Because I see a lot of that as well. And what does that appreciation look like? Does it look like monetary appreciation? Does it look like creative control appreciation? Does it look like audience members showing up appreciation? There's a variety of ways, but I would like to see our art just more valued and more appreciated as a whole.
Thank you for that response, Rasheed. I thought about the concept of Afrofuturism. I know today I was talking to one of our sister scholars, Montia Gardner, and she said, I'm tired of racism and COVID-19. I really wish that we can articulate Afrofuturism, right? So in thinking about Black art in the future, I'm curious about what tips everyone has in regards to making Black art, more appreciated, and also how do we invest into the Black art community? So are there any tips, especially from Dr. 99 and Chris B, since you already are independent artists? So what tips would you offer artists who want to invest more in Black art, and also for consumers who too want to invest more in Black art? I do think that this is a fertile time for us to really reimagine the ways in which we think about Black wealth and how we build Black community wealth. So I'm curious in regards to your tips and suggestions for that.
Well, unfortunately, one I want to go back to what Rasheed said about tokenism real quick. I feel like the tokenism has been happening since day one. We've been tokenized forever. Every time we come up with something cool, okay, yeah, let's put that one thing out there and make that, and run with it. That's been happening, and you're right. Being Black art is going to be the new hot thing for a stretch, because that's how a lot of them are dealing with their guilt, by trying to push forward, oh, let me help with this, let me help with that, let me try and get some Black faces out there, let me try and get some Black art out there. That's where we are. That's happening. I do think, though, that the trick to that is taking advantage where you can in terms of your own art, in order to start helping to build up Black wealth and Black art spaces. If you can finagle those ridiculous opportunities as they are into something better, into something that serves a greater purpose, we got to take the opportunities where we can take them. If you can't build your own on your own, then you got to grab what's out there and spin it, So I'm watching on, been watching on social media, on Twitter, screenwriters, a billion screenwriters popped up over the last month, or screenwriters too, but screenwriters and producers and content creators all popping up and saying, hey, how can we help? Let's get some Black folks where they need to be, send us your ideas, send us your concepts, send us, and we'll at least sit down and read them, whereas before there was no window for that. There was no opportunity for that, because we were getting beaten out by a million white people with way less talent, just on principle, So again, I'm not saying that that's how it should be. I would much rather it not be a matter of having to take the tokenism where you can take it. But if that's what's happening, we got to snatch it up and run with it where we can. That's what we've been doing since day one. We take a terrible opportunity and we turn it into something positive. So anyway, I'm sorry. What was your question?
I'm going to pick it up right there and say, again, this is where community comes in. So with me having an entertainment blog where I needed the graduate student assistant money that I was getting, y'all know that wasn't a lot of money, but it gave me gas money. I could buy a CD here and there. I could pay to get into a show. I could pay for a website. but I also needed people to, when I write something about an artist, share it. And I need people, and I always ask people to stay local. So now there's this thing I've heard people say that some of these national organizations are, people are sending money there in the interest of, oh, I'm supporting an organization that's supporting Black people. And turns out maybe they're really not. But you know more about people locally, and that's just by word of mouth. Community means a big thing. So I all of us know people who have music they're trying to put out. They have short films. We put out stuff all the time and people look straight over us. How many women do I know that worship Beyonce, but this other woman right here who sings really well, did you come to her show? No, you didn't. I was there. It was 8 other people there. I wrote the article, and I see a lot of artists or visual artists, different types of artists that I've written about, where they're still sharing an article that I did about them a couple of years ago. Great artists. Why isn't anybody else supporting them? No, they're looking at all these international, national artists and, oh, this is the hot stuff. It's people who right next to you in the grocery store who are banging artists, but you're not supporting them. Why? Because you're like, oh, well, you're still doing that, almost like how what Chris K said, oh, you're an artist, but what else do you do? Or if somebody might work somewhere else during the day, but they are an artist also, they treat that person's art like a hobby because they're not, they haven't blown up yet. It's wild, even like doing articles for Take Me Out to the Go-Go. Even some artists themselves might downplay somebody local giving them, or a Black publication giving them some shine, where we're like their biggest fans. But as soon as the local morning show, on a mainstream publication says, here's this artist, and it's like, oh, everybody look at me on this. Well, why didn't you tell everybody to look at you while you were when, we wrote about you? Some Black people who didn't have any money wrote about you. So it takes all of us to support each other and I'm keep using the word community, but even destroying that ideal, just because if you got 500 Facebook friends, I can guarantee you 150 of them at least have some kind of artistic thing that they're pushing. I know a whole lot of people who make visual art. The art on my walls in my house are from people that I directly handed money to, because I was like, oh shoot, I got money, I'll pay for that. And that's what it takes. So it's not always about, I don't know anything about like the grants from the organizations and all that kind of stuff. That to me, I think I got a grant like one time, but that was because I thought it would be easy and I had to pair up with other people to get. But I know about saving my little pennies to support people that I can touch and people that I can see. I'm not even a fan of like the national artists and stuff. I like people that I know, because I know when I hand you money and somebody handed you money because they're really feeling you, and I know that actually helped you out. You know what I mean? Like if you already got $1 million, like you don't know me, you don't need my 15, 20, 100, 250, whatever dollars to buy your art. So.
Thank you very much, Dr. 99. I think actually we all answered the last 2 questions, which refer to how do we support artists, both as an artist and community members. So I'm curious, Dr. Lyrical Tay, if you had anything to add on. I know you also do come from an artist background. You really, every time like your daughter does something, you send it to us, you really promote her art at a young age, right? Which I really admire, because as we said repeatedly, our art is a form of therapy, meditation, right? Helps us through our mental health. So I'm curious, are there any offerings that you have in regards to supporting our community, both as community members and as artists?
I'm just going to co-sign what Chris B said, what Dr. 99 said in terms of community. And when you see local, the whole see local, buy local, and nothing against national, because I love me some Beyonce. But if I hear a sister from Baltimore who can blow, I'm trying to cop her CD too. Like, let me go over there and get me that. So it's important to do that as well, and also teach that. But in terms of, I do want to just go back to what you said in terms of what are we doing right now in terms of the vibrancy of this movement. And just to those of you out there who are clogged like me, like it's okay, because my art has not been coming out in ways like in terms of writing or that sort of thing. And so I've been more of a reader of other people's art, a viewer of other people's art to help me process this moment. And so maybe whatever catharsis is going on in there will come out later, but I'm definitely very grateful to those who are producing art right now. So thank you for that, and inspiring our youth to use their voice, their agency, as well, to get their art there, and to encourage them to be beyond boundaries, color outside the lines. And then we begin to make our definitions for and with ourselves, so that we set even more norms in these different artistic realms.
Thank you, Dr. Lyrical Tay. I do want Chris to wrap up. We often end with any final words from everyone. So since you have to go in a couple minutes, one, can you say your affirmation? And two, can you start with your final words?
I'll start. So my final words are, thank you for having me on. This was really a good way to kind of get to know other members of my community and see where everyone's thoughts lie right now. I'm just in a point where I'm changing things in my own art practice. So it's good just to hear where people are, especially because we don't really see much of each other anymore. So I've been kind of struggling with ways to really write about things in the past couple of weeks, but usually it takes me a while to process stuff. When I read Ta-Nehisi Coates' work, Between the World and Me, a couple of years ago, a lot of that stuff resonated with my core. It emotionally, I cried from it. I had a whole experience just reading that book. And that usually happens when I read books by kind of this autobiographical nonfiction or fiction pieces of work by Black authors. So, and for me, it's because my practice is just rooted in my body. I wanted to just read this quote from him. So, but all our phrasing, race relations, racial chasm, racial justice, racial profiling, white privilege, even white supremacy, serves to obscure that racism is a visceral experience, that it dislodges brains, blocks airways, rips muscles, extracts organs, cracks bones, breaks teeth. You must always remember that the sociology, the history, the economics, the graphs, the charts, the regressions all land with great violence upon the body. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Chris K. I'll check in with you later.
Okay, great.
Good morning, guys.
Yeah, thanks again. It was great. Take care, Christopher Brown. Take care, Rasheed.
You too.
Take care,
care.
Dr. Lyrical Tay. Yeah, good meeting you too. Take care, Dr. 99. Bye, Dr. Cupid.
See ya. Yeah, so to conclude, in regards to our exhale section, I'd like to know, are there any final words that everyone would have to offer in regards to art? So we can first start with Rasheed.
My final words are, we are in trying times, health-wise, because we're in the middle of a pandemic, but also the other pandemic, well, COVID-19 is the pandemic, but the other pandemic of racism is also prevalent. I am excited as an artist, but I'm also excited just as a queer Black man, because I feel like we're seeing a shift and we're seeing a lot of conversations happen. I know non-Black people have been very scared about COVID-19 specifically, but a lot of the Black people I talk to, I think because we've all been born in survival mode. I'll be 36 in August, so there's never been a day where I haven't recognized or been affected by oppression and racism in some sort of way. You know what I mean? So when COVID-19 happened, I was like, okay, that's difficult, but it's not gonna kill us. We've survived. We as a people have survived much, much worse. Our ancestors have survived much, much worse, so we can be where we are today. So I'm actually very excited, and I'm very proud of Black people at this point in time. because it seems like we've risen to the occasion. So I think my final thought is just onward and upward.
Amen and Ashe to your final words. So now I'll go over to Crispy to whatever final words you would like to add on.
I guess I would just say that, art imitates life, and we have seen some very interesting life happening over the course of the last couple of months, as Rasheed has pointed out. So I feel like in the months to come, we're going to see some very interesting art, very interesting representations and interpretations of what's happened, where we are, where we're going. A lot of the media that has come before at this point has been a reflection of what was projected forward, what people thought was going to happen. Star Trek, for example, way far in the future, and yet 90% of that stuff has kind of happened in some version, in terms of technology and other things. So I think as we progress through this period in time where we are right now, we're going to see some very interesting things and hopefully some world-changing things come out of this, including the art that is produced during this time.
Thank you, Crispy. Dr. Luricote, do you have any final words?
Yes, just in terms of the art community, definitely producing to get it out, right? As you said, it's being the refuge, the two pandemics, that is going on right now, that we need to process, utilizing art as a refuge to get it out, because there is therapy, and that's also therapeutic for people who are receiving your art. So whenever you can and how you can, go ahead and get that out, because we are here to receive and also talk back to you, because we talk back to art.
Word, Dr. Luricote. Do you have anything to add on, Dr. 99, for your final words?
Final words: support local artists. Pay attention to them and give them a kind word. Share a post on social media. Just when you see certain people who just share it, unless it's something you absolutely disagree with, but people who are doing that thing, and take people's art seriously. When they tell you they are an artist, take them seriously and respect it.
Thank you, Dr. 99. I would just like to add on that in regards to what Rasheed said, onward and upward. I think in this time, doing my meditative practices, I said that I will live as a Black person and thrive, and I also live as a Black person and be free. I think when we think about the pandemic of racism and sexism and homophobia and all the evilisms in which we have to live through, whether or not that's firsthand or relationally within our communities, just to have the mindset of freedom and also the mindset to thrive. So what does that look like for you? And also to not inhibit others' freedom, right? So I think James Baldwin said it, the point is which you inhibit my freedom, that's when we have a problem, right? So in whatever art practice you do, whatever role or profession, just be mindful about how you are navigating that space, and if your freedom may be inhibiting someone others, just to self-check yourself. So that'd be my final words for this section.
Rasheed, you want to do your affirmation?
Sure. So my affirmation is the paradox of education is precisely this: that as one begins to become conscious, one begins to examine the society in which he is being educated. It's from James Baldwin.
Okay. Mine is from Sonia Sanchez. The Black artist is dangerous. Black art controls the Negro's reality, negates negative influences, and creates positive images.
Okay, and my quote is from an artist out of DC named Quest Skinner. And she said, when you give artists a fertile land that they can cultivate and where they can create, they have a trickling out effect into the community. The artists become vessels for community needs.
Do you want to go, Dr. Luricote?
Sure. The quote that I'm speaking, I definitely want to honor Dr. Shirley Bassfield Dunlap in thinking about this, because of how she lived her life and how she was as an educator, as a mentor, as a friend, it empowers other people. So this is from the artist, Dr. Maya Angelou. I would like to be known as an intelligent woman, a courageous woman, a loving woman, a woman who teaches by being. And I definitely learn from the being of Dr. Shirley Bassfield Dunlap, and artists who teach through their being, whose art through their being. We learn. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lyrical Tay. This is going to be a full circle moment because my sister actually got the opportunity to sit in their practice for the piano lesson that Dr. Shirley Bassfield Dunlap also put on. So within her director's notes, she states, "So as you journey to your prospective places, I invite you to visit with the spirit of your ancestors who have breathed life of so many fashions into you. Thank them for molding you."
Yeah, I just want to bless the name Shirley Bassfield Dunlap and for what she did for all of us. She was a light to all of us, and so many people loved her. She was a director of theater, professor at Morgan State. Her students loved her. Her colleagues loved her. We were in community as grad students with her, and she graduated with her PhD at age 65 from UMBC, and that was beautiful. But she was a beautiful person, and I have the honor, just want to take the honor to lift up her name.
Grab real quick the last text that she sent me, which was so encouraging, just in terms of when we're doubting ourselves and we are doubting our own authenticity. Just something. So this episode is dedicated to Dr. Shirley Bassfield Dunlap. Thank you for your words of encouragement. Thank you for your light in the world. And I'm going to end with some of your words of encouragement to me. I know that you will be awesome because you have a passion for this research and the plans for it. Just know that you are the only scholar in the world that knows this and have put it to the people. To take note, bitches.
I love that. Thank you, Dr. Lyrical Tay.
Wait, can we say that though, maybe?
Yeah, you can. That's the beauty of it. Full authentic self. That's her art.
Unapologetically Black, as Rasheed said.
But also audacity, you know, like really taking up space. And that is important because all too often, especially in terms of respectability politics or not wanting to show up too Black, you know, we dim our light. And she's like, no, you show up full you, full knowledge of what you've done. And, you know, the whole take notes is important for that because we have to show up as us and thrive, as you said, Dr. Cupid, thrive in that. And people are watching. I watched her, people are watching us. And, you know, it's important when we begin to live our authentic selves and our truth, that enables and empowers others who are watching us to thus live and follow suit in terms of walking their truth. So that we're not merely surviving because we've learned generations of how to survive, but so that we're showing, you know, those who are coming with us, coming after us, how to thrive.
Thank you so much for exhaling with us. Please join the conversation on social media and share this with your friends. Use the hashtag Sista Docs Exhale and follow us at Sista Docs Exhale on Twitter, but you can also find us on Facebook and make comments on the YouTube video. So until next time, until next season, we wish you peace.
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 Love, light, and insight.